The space itself becomes a domain. And the modeling language is what's used to program those spaces. And it can program all kinds of things. The ontology for the programming language, it takes into account activities, it takes into account credentials, it takes into account all kinds of aspects, multidimensional aspects about those things and what's occurring with them over time in that space and with whom and who has access, who, all kinds of things like that. Like if it can be measured in physical or digital reality, it could be programmed using the hyperspace modeling language.
Hi, Denise. I'm so glad you're here today.
Hi, Andrea. Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
I am really excited about your work, I have to say. Sort of found it through my collaborations with active inference groups, and I really love what you're doing, the podcast, the Substack. So I really want to know how you got here. How did you get into this?
Well, Versus AI, they're leading this whole effort with the active inference methodology being used for AI. They've got Karl Friston as their chief scientist.
Not a bad chief scientist, I must say.
Right. So one of the original founders, Dan Mapes, is a longtime friend of mine. And so I've known that when he and Gabriel Renee started Versus back in like 2017-ish, I knew about it. I knew what was happening. So I've been kind of following along in the shadows, watching because I knew what the vision was. I knew when I've watched it unfold and grow and expand. And they wrote the book, The Spatial Web, back in 2018. I think it actually was published early 2019, but that laid out this whole vision. And then they started collaborating with Karl, and it all just has expanded from there. So about 2 years ago, talking with Dan, we hadn't been in contact for a little while, and we were catching up, and he was telling me that Versus had just gone public up on the Neo Exchange up in Canada, and that the platform was going to be launching to the public within like a year and a half-ish. That was the projection at the time. And I was like, oh, okay, there's a transition mindset here. People know about this. At the time, I was really heavily working in the Web3 space. And, I've been in technology for my adult life. So I've always been kind of a tech nerd. And like when back in like I want to say like 1998-ish, I was using Photoshop, and I started really getting into these 3D graphics programs back then, like Ray Dream Studio and Bryce and all these. Rendering time was painful. So that was actually one of the big motivators that really got me diving into technology. Was I was using these programs on more of a creative side, but to be able to actually make them useful with a home computer, I just started building my own computers.
Yeah, I think that's what I'm trying to figure out about you a little bit. What's the driving motivation? Because when I listen to your podcast, the Spatial podcast, I think it feels to me that something is motivating you more than just that you want to be a podcaster.
Yeah. So no, and I have what I've done, I have my podcast, but the way I've done all of my writing around this and the podcast and.
Yeah, you're a writer first. We should say that.
I write a lot better than I speak.
Well, you clarify things very well. We'll get into it a bit, but this deep learning versus spatial web, active inference, AI. I think some of your writings on that clarify it really well. But we'll get into that. But anyway, yeah.
Yeah. So what I've been building is a media vehicle around all of this. And it's because I have a bigger vision with it. And a lot of it has to do with the technology that's coming out with Versus and their platform. I really see that when their platform comes out and it enables anybody to be able to build one of these intelligent agents, these active inference intelligent agents, within our internet, because that's what's happening with their platform. Our internet is expanding into this 3D digital twin space. So it's going from the World Wide Web to include all entities. And the programming language bakes context into all the things in the spaces and relates them to activities, and it's all credentialed and permissioned and everything. That informs the AI. That, coupled with the Internet of Things, sensors, everything, that's going to give these active inference agents the real-time information to learn from their perspective within the network, all of these agents are going to be aware of each other. They're going to be aware of the network. I feel like we're about to see this explosion of development, of innovation.
It's almost, I mean, it's, well, we should probably back up a little bit, because when you say the vehicle, you want it to be a vehicle, do you mean sort of a place where people can come and start as a beginner, or any place?
Yeah. And so at this point, yes, education, I feel like, is the most important aspect, because there's a lot of people that are building amazing technologies. And one of the biggest problems, especially with the Web3 technologies or the extended reality technologies, is that they're all just disparate technologies. It's really hard to bridge that interoperability gap. And that's what the spatial web is going to do. So it's going to do that, and then also empower everything with AI. So to me, it's exciting, because all these people that are building these amazing products within those spaces, I feel like they need to know this is coming, because it's going to solve a lot of their problems. It's going to expand their capabilities. And I feel like it's going to usher in this kind of augmented reality, mixed reality existence that we've all kind of envisioned, but the foundation hasn't been there. And this is bringing the foundation.
So, like, let's try, for people who maybe even haven't ever heard of the spatial web yet, or Web 3.0 even, because there's a wide variety of different people who are going to probably watch this. But so what do you think of as 3.0 or Web 3 and Web 3.0? Maybe you can help me and others understand what that means to you.
So that's a really important distinction. So to me, Web3 refers to the technologies themselves, right?
So you mean like augmented reality?
Crypto,
okay.
Blockchain, crypto, augmented reality, virtual reality, Internet of Things, all of these technologies that kind of enhance that Web3 space. Web 3.0 is simply the next evolution of our internet protocol. So the World Wide Web, that's Web 2. Mobile with the World Wide Web was 2.5. And we are about to evolve that into Web 3.0, which is also called the Spatial Web. And what's interesting is Versus actually created the protocol, but they donated it to the public because nobody could own the internet. It's just that the protocol had to evolve into this 3D digital twin kind of space, to where it had to become a spatial protocol. It had to take us away from a library of pages and documents like the World Wide Web. It had to take us away from the concept of the internet. Has always been this decentralized vision, but it's impossible with the World Wide Web, because all the transactions take place under the umbrella of whoever owns the domain. And the domain is the website. So it's a centralized transactional process, right?
Right.
So it's self-sovereign identity is impossible. Security is really difficult. The World Wide Web is the most unsecured environment to even try to be using all these technologies in, because the only permissions you're granting within the World Wide Web is, do you agree that they can have all your information and data or not? There's no nuance to it at all.
How long will you pay for whatever service or?
Right. So what's really interesting with the Spatial Web Protocol, which is HSTP, Hyperspace Transaction Protocol, and HSML, Hyperspace Modeling Language. So Versus, they developed the protocol about 3.5 years ago, donated it to the public, to the IEEE, which is the largest core standards body in the world. They develop core standards for anything that's like a public good, as far as a technology that's going to be used globally.
That's wonderful. What is the protocol, though, for people who have no idea what we're talking about? Like, maybe we should even, let's think of a little narrative of, so we'll skip the invention of the internet and so on, up to kind of the fact that it's a part of all of our lives, and we're all using it. We're all embedded in it. We all sort of take it for granted that this is what happens, like that this is just the way this kind of technology works, that you go to a two-dimensional or whatever, depending on how you're looking at it. You go to a page, and that's what the web is. That's HTML, and all these different coding languages are writing these things that end up just being pages that you visit. And there's always a medium. Someone owns the service usually, and you have to kind of go through them. So that's kind of what you're saying is you're basically handing over your data and rights in this way. And we've just assumed this is the way it is, right? This is
Yeah. Well,
how
it's
it goes.
liberated.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And what you just said is that, and I think I've heard or seen it somewhere, maybe you wrote it or Dan, or I don't know, someone, that instead of the page in this whole way that I just described, we're going to start thinking about space itself as the interactive environment. I wish I had I guess, like, instead of programming a page, you're going to program the space. I think that's what the quote was.
Yes.
That's a
Yeah.
completely different, flipping, weird way of thinking about this thing that's
Yeah.
now become normal for us, which was also very weird when it first came out, the internet. So that's what this, like you just talked about, HSML, which I think is so cool. Even just the name, Hyperspace Modeling Language. Oh my God. As someone who knows a little bit about programming, it's very exciting. But for someone who doesn't know anything about like what this means, how would you you've done it in your writing and I'll link to it, but just how would you kind of introduce them to what's going to change, what could
Okay.
change, what's
Yeah.
happening with spatial web?
So, instead of having website domains, all entities become a domain. So people, places, things, they become domains that are programmable.
And you're not
And
going through a medium anymore, is that right?
yeah, the space itself becomes a domain. So, and the modeling language is what's used to program those spaces. And it can program all kinds of things. The ontology for the programming language, it takes into account activities, it takes into account credentials, it takes into account all kinds of aspects, multidimensional aspects about those things and what's occurring with them over time in that space and
Right.
with whom and who has access, who, all kinds of things like that. Like if it can be measured in physical or digital reality, it could be programmed using the hyperspace modeling language.
The spatial web talks about being natural, and the way you just described that sounds like a human life that kind of develops and you have a history and a trajectory, which we don't have in deep learning. You just have or programming. It's a totally different way of thinking about it. Does that make sense for you? Because I think a lot
Yeah.
about how we each have these kind of paths in life and so on and so forth. And something like a deep learning AI has not anything like that.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, and what's really fascinating though is that you're programming these attributes about the physical life, but also about a digital realm too,
Right.
right?
Right.
So
Sort of twin.
that means that everything then becomes a digital twin. And then you can run simulations with the digital twin. You can do projections. You can run simulations to find out all kinds of things, tweak parameters and stuff. And it's going to really give us a lot of control with this simulation aspect of it. Businesses will be able to run real simulations based off of real data and real things and make better decisions. We'll be able to address things like climate change problems and stuff and run simulations of our planet and really be able to see what we need to do to what degree to get the results we want. When you think of smart cities, city planners will be able to run simulations and really find out what's going to be effective, what's going to make a difference for the population, for systems within the city.
In a way, it's giving us better predictive processing skills by by having this twin simulated layer. But I guess what I'm trying to envision is like, so do you imagine I could just walk into my garden and simulate what I might do there in that space? Or would it be more like similar to something that we're used to where I would go into a VR environment or even something just normally like a computer screen and simulate? What's the difference in the way that everything is linking together?
I think what we need to really take into consideration is that a lot of things are going to be evolving over the
Yeah.
even just the next couple of years. Trillions of sensors are coming on board over the next 10 years. And those are all sensors that are going to play a part within this network. as far as the AI is going to be able to interact with it, with the information coming in off of those sensors. It's going to be imperative that we have AI to help us parse all this information. And then devices are going to evolve. I mean, we've already seen the Apple Vision Pro and, you know, what that kind of does. There's going to be different types of devices that evolve once. It's like with any technology, once there's new capabilities, then people start refining how you're going to integrate with it.
Some kind of wearable, perhaps, or some kind of, I mean, we already talk about this, the biological, not implantation or something, but more
no, but like you already see stuff like with the little retina things, all kinds of
cochlear
stuff.
implants and stuff for Parkinson's. I mean, there's plenty of examples. But I guess what I would like to try to clarify before we talk more is what are the kind of main goals of spatial web, or maybe not even goals, but priorities that are different from the deep learning world? Because we've already sort of mentioned them a few times, but
so what it enables is a completely different type of AI than deep learning, because it enables distributed intelligence at scale. So the big difference is obviously you've got deep learning and then you've got the active inference, and they function completely differently. They're two different methodologies. But what the spatial web does is it gives this common language for all of the AI, to the intelligent agents, to communicate with each other across that network. So it enables a network where you can have multitudes of these intelligent agents that are all learning from their own frame of reference within the network. People will be developing these intelligent agents. Humans will be developing these intelligent agents and imparting their own knowledge into them, right? So it's going to preserve all of these, all the diversity of knowledge throughout our world. You've got deep learning, a monolithic machine that is trained off of just trillions of pieces of data that are intended to get it to output something that seems appropriate or matches kind of your expectation of what you're hoping to get out of it, right? But all it's doing is reformulating what it's been fed and spitting it out, right? It can't come up with new information. It can only draw off of the information that's there. Now, within the spatial web, with these active inference agents, they're learning based off of real-time data. They're learning based off of the real world that is constantly evolving. And with the way active inference works, with the action perception loop, and they're actually really learning. They're able to adapt with all that new information. They're able to then share it with each other, learn from each other. So then you have this distributed knowledge that grows into this ever-evolving collective intelligence. And that's really the difference.
Yeah, very well said. I guess so with something like deep learning, there's a programmer who's putting in the information, and yes, we can train it on tons of data, we can put all the data in, but it's still, once you put it out, then it's trained on that data. So you're gonna have to do a whole update, like Chat GPT-4 or whatever. You have to keep updating. But what you're saying is this AI, a spatial AI, would be more about the space itself continually updating itself, much the way the real world already works. I mean, that we all sort of dynamically interact and update one another's Markov language or whatever. But is that kind of the
difference? When you think of our human knowledge, it grows because we have a diversity of intelligences that are sharing with each other, but also pushing back on each other and challenging each other. And that's how the information gets tested. And then what's right sticks, and then it grows. It's the scientific method, right?
Yeah.
And that's really the difference. And that's why when you just have one brain, it's not going to grow its knowledge beyond what it knows. How can it? It can it can
It's
be
like, yeah.
introduced to more information that then is in its bank. But those machines, they cannot adapt to new information, just like you said. Because of the way they're trained, they take a lot of adjustments to get it to actually
Yeah. To do
perform the
whatever we
way.
want it to do, write a paper.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Well, they're
Hmm.
very useful, but they're tools. And I
Oh
think
yeah.
what we're going to see is that they're not going away, but they
No,
will
no.
also come onto the network as tools, just like
Yeah.
every other technology.
I don't know if you've seen this. I wonder in your experience. I also wonder when you first started, like encountered AI, and I don't mean using it, but thinking about what AI is and becoming part of the creation of it or whatever. But
Well, I've been a nerd for a long time. So like
okay,
even
so you
it's like
always,
19,
yeah.
I was reading Asimov and
Oh,
Heinlein and
okay. That's great. Yeah, a lot of us start with sci-fi. Um,
yeah.
but I guess I wonder if you've seen this, like with people who aren't nerds about AI. I'm not. I've become more so. But when you just are like in your normal life, a normal person doing their normal job who doesn't need to think about AI every single day. But now most people do because it's
Yeah.
suddenly everyone's thinking about AI, or they see AI doing art, or they realize AI can write their paper for them. It's changed, right, in the past few
Oh
years in a big way
yeah,
with language
really
models.
with ChatGPT, that really brought it to the surface for most
So
people.
yeah, and I guess people seem to imagine that it is learning in the way that you described the spatial web. It doesn't seem that people really understand that it's actually very language based in terms of this kind of that you're putting in the representations, and that's all that it can give you back.
Yeah, I mean, people
Disconnect.
definitely misunderstand what's actually occurring there because
Yeah.
it's a parlor trick.
Yeah, it is. I
You
mean,
know, I
it
mean,
seems magical if you don't know what's going
yeah,
on.
it's really good at making people think that, oh my gosh, it must be thinking because I asked it this and it gave me an answer. But the reality is if people really understood that the way these language models are working, it's not hard to recognize. You give it enough training data, it's not hard for it to start recognizing the patterns. I mean, we've
Right.
got 26 letters in the English alphabet, and you find that certain letters tend to follow each other, certain words tend to follow each other, and then you train it on specialized data like legal data or whatever. Then it
Mm-hmm.
starts to learn patterns that are of things that are said over and over. So you give it a prompt, it's going to search through its database and go, okay, well, this is probably suffice and sound appropriate, but appropriate and accurate are two different things.
Yeah.
Appropriate doesn't mean that it understands anything.
In a way, it's
But
like if you ask me a question and I just search on the internet and tell you what I find. I don't have to understand it at all. It's
yeah,
kind of the Chinese thought experiment in philosophy, where it's just it is the way that language works. If it didn't have all those very repeatable regularities and patterns, it wouldn't be language. So the machine, as it's built, just learns those and then can reproduce them. But spatial web, how is it? I mean, I know it's going to use it's using active inference AI, so maybe we should talk about that. What do you see? How would people begin to understand that? Is it more like how they're actually imagining the current AI?
yeah. So the thing is, these active inference agents, they actually can do causal reasoning, right? The way it works within the free energy principles, it's constantly trying to it's taking in sensory information and it's trying to predict what was causing that, right? So that it can
Like
then
to
act.
minimize surprise, I guess. What's your
Yeah.
like one sentence idea of the free energy principle?
Yeah, I mean, basically, you said it. It's taking in sensory information and then acting on it to make better predictions.
Yeah, to make better way. Yeah. I think it's generalized, but we can just, for people who don't know haven't heard it, if there is, that it's pretty simple. It's what we're doing. And when we're moving through the world, we want to develop certain habits and patterns so that we can continue moving through the world, so that we can exist. That's what we learn: how to walk, we learn how to talk, we learn all of these kind of ways of being in the world, making our way in the world. And you can think about that as the body minimizing surprise and just
You know,
aligning with the world in a certain way.
Daniel Friedman, he actually gave me the most simplistic example,
Oh,
which
great.
I've been using with people because it actually it does kind of give you that understanding. He was like, okay, say you have a wooden table, right? You think it's wood, or it's wood, but you're wondering, is it rough or is it smooth? You have to touch it. You have to actually act on it and find out. And then that gives you more sensory information. And oh, it is smooth or it is rough now, right? But it's that whole
so next time, you
satisfying
know,
that curiosity by acting on your environment so that you can get more information to gain that understanding. And yeah.
Great. So the spatial web would be using a kind of, it would, instead of deep learning, where you're just training the agent on data, that pictures or words or whatever, what's happening with the active inference in the
So
spatial?
it's taking in real-time information through sensory data in like IoT sensors. So you have cameras, you have robotics, you have devices, all kinds of things that are feeding real-time information into the network. And then you also have all of the HSML that has been programmed into the network, with providing context for all of the entities in the spaces and their interrelationships with each other. So when in active inference, when you're taking in the sensory information, you're measuring it against what to be true, the model that you've built of your world, right? And it starts out as an infant, it's just your mother. And then you start opening up to the room around you and the other people in the room. And as children evolve and we evolve into adults, we start getting into more specialized intelligences. But, it's that expansion of our own world model by this constant interaction with our environment and learning in that way. That's how these active inference agents are going to learn. They're going to be constantly taking in real-time data through sensory input, measuring against what they know to be true, which is the model they've developed from all of the context baked into all the things in the world around them.
Yeah.
They'll be operating from their own frame of reference, like whether it's like right now, I'm here, I'm sitting in my house. And so this is my frame of reference. My frame of reference expands on things that I learned, things that I've studied, things that I'm my own programming, basically.
Yeah, I mean, this is what I call like a waymaking, or I think of as navigability, in terms of just that throughout our life, we're born and we go through all these experiments, and when we do develop what you could call a model, even though it's not like a static thing that's sitting inside your body, it's more your body itself in the interaction ongoing. But you develop a way of being in the world so as to keep being in the world. And so I guess what this is going to do is help in a way extend that. So it's almost, we almost have to kind of rethink what it even, like, it almost feels weird to call it artificial intelligence now, even though of course it's in that scope.
Yeah,
But
to me,
yeah.
to me, when it like with, because my whole channels are spatial web AI, but to me, just because of what you just said, and I mean, if you listen to Gabriel Renee or any of the Versus team, they're like doing natural intelligence, not artificial intelligence. So to me, it's like autonomous intelligence.
That's good.
I feel like that's what AI is going to be transitioning into actually meaning when it's referring to this. And you'll have autonomous intelligent systems.
Is it still human-centric though? Because I hear the word natural used a lot, and it's almost like natural versus artificial. And of course, with Karl's work and active inference, I mean, it's literally building from a living, dynamic biological system. So it's, but I wonder, is it like, do you really, how do you think of that? Do you see that as a kind of a dichotomy that, or is it blurring a lot, this idea of natural and artificial? What is the natural part?
Well, the natural part is because the way these intelligent agents learn is
the way we learn, the way life learns.
The same way that biological systems learn, according to active inference, which is based on the free energy principle. And the free energy principle is how neurons learn. So that's why it's termed natural intelligence, because it's the intelligence of nature. Now,
which is another confusion, because the deep learning, people think it comes from the brain, but it's actually not really the way that life works. It just has the name like that.
It's just, no, it's engineering.
It's inspired by, but
of engineering versus science, right? You know, I mean, that's really the difference. What's really interesting is that Geoffrey Hinton came from University College London, Karl Friston, University College London. At one point, they worked across the hall from each other.
That's crazy.
But, Geoffrey
Something about
Hinton was
UCL.
focused on an engineering approach, and
Mhm.
Karl was like, no,
Yeah. And like you were
that's
saying
not the
before,
way.
it's not either or. I mean, we have this AI, traditional AI, deep learning. It's pretty amazing that we can use it to better understand things, to save ourselves time and energy.
For as far as like the only approach to AI, it's just not sustainable energy wise.
Yeah,
And what's
that's
really interesting is Versus just gave a demo a few weeks ago demonstrating they've been doing these AI benchmark tests that are like
mhm.
really important within the AI industry because they mean
Yeah.
something.
So like looking
So
at the Go or
yeah,
arcade games and stuff.
yeah, like Atari challenge
Atari,
that,
yeah.
yeah. And what was really interesting is in one of the benchmarks, which I think was playing Pong, right?
All
You
right.
know, the fastest, best deep learning machine could get to human level performance within 2 hours. They did it within 12 minutes.
Wow.
And they did it at like 1% the model size. And they did it on a standard laptop using a standard graphics card. So
Yeah,
that's a
it's real.
huge, yeah, that's a huge difference too. Um, that
So much
means that
faster.
all of the energy resources required for the AI is distributed
Yeah,
among our devices we're already using, right?
incredible.
Yeah,
And
so
much more
so
like the body learns because you can't, yeah, you have to learn in that kind of at that kind of a pace too. As you're talking, I'm realizing it's spatial web, but it's also spatio-temporal. I mean, there's a whole time paradigm shift happening here too.
yeah. It's exciting to me. And that's why because I think maybe because I've seen like the vision unfolding and I kind of knew it was coming, right?
Yeah,
To know that they did it.
yeah,
And it's even bigger than anybody imagined. And it's exciting to me because I've known what the potential of this could be. I think once people start to see really a clear understanding of what sets their technology apart from what is happening in the deep learning world,
hmm
I think that there's going to be a lot of light bulb moments this year where people are going to start really understanding, oh, this is Dan Mapes. He refers to this collective intelligence within the network as a nervous system for the planet. I mean,
yeah.
it's pretty
Well, I
interesting.
think I mean, we already, gosh, it's already been some time, but I really think it's important to talk about that idea of transparency, that idea of energy efficiency. You talked about it a little bit already, but this that people could own their own data. There's all these things now that we assume, as I was saying, we have this kind of system and we assume it has to be this way, that we have to give over our data, that we have to go through a middle. We don't really own our domains. All of this we just assume is the way it should be. Also, what you were just describing about the efficiency, the time, we spend so much energy and it's not transparent. All these things, I guess when I was asking you about what are the kind of visions of spatial web, I see there's a philosophical vision too and a value-based, and we haven't mentioned that word yet, but there's a value shift. Right now, we take for granted that we just are addicted to our phones and our computers, but those are algorithms. Those are things that's on purpose. Doesn't have to be that way, right? Isn't this
Yeah.
opening up like another way for people to imagine how that they could use technology?
Yeah, and what I think it's going to do is it's going to integrate itself into our daily lives a lot more naturally, because it will be we'll be interacting with sensors and interacting with all of these different elements of it, and so everybody's going to have their own active inference agent personal assistant that's going to be able to help parse all this crazy amounts of data that we encounter. It's going to be able to help us navigate all of this information according to our own preferences and desires too. Right now, like you said, we're all subjected to these algorithms that are predatory.
Yeah, they're built to be. I mean, that's the way they're built, because
Yeah.
that's how they get attention and money.
And we're going to have a lot more control over our data because we'll be able to decide how and when it's shared and for how long and with whom. And people will still trade data for access and different things like that. But the difference is you'll actually control a lot more of the nuance with it, and you'll be able to decide, and there will be a value exchange that actually rewards you directly.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds wonderful, but how? I mean, I can imagine people listening and they're thinking, this sounds great, but I don't see
Well, it
how
has
it's
to
going to
do with
happen.
the protocol and the way the protocol works, right? So the way HSTP, Hyperspace Transaction Protocol, all entities, right? So people, places, things, spaces, every entity has an identity and becomes a domain. And
So is it kind
it
of a blanket
with
sensor
activity.
that just goes over the whole Earth or something? I mean, I guess I'm trying to understand how.
There's going to be a registry, right? And to be able to access domains through activities, it will require credentials, right? So credentials that can prove identity or ownership or authority or I mean, all of that, right? So
there's more transparency, not less.
right, because the control is in your hands. It's in the user's hand. So I will be able to control who can have access. I'll be able to go to the doctor and tell the doctor, like, okay, you can access this information, this guardrailed amount of information for this long. You can put an expiration on it. The spatial web enables zero trust architecture, right? So because it's going to be powered by AI within it too, there will be able to be confirmation of certain aspects of data that where you don't even have to reveal it to a source. You don't have to reveal the sensitive data, but it can be confirmed within the network. So it completely protects your private data. There's so much privacy protection. One of the things that Dan told me a while back, that when he and Gabe were really contemplating how to do what this protocol would need to be, they really wanted to solve the three main problems with the World Wide Web, which is like hacking, tracking, and faking, right? So
that's
corporate
great.
surveillance, the whole hacking and
hacking, tracking, and faking. That's
yeah,
a good way to say
so
it.
it's secure and it truly is decentralized. And so the power then is in the hands of all of the individuals, everybody within the space. Your AI agent, your personal agent, is going to be able to know all of your details and know you so well, but that will be guardrailed. It's not going to be accessible unless you give permissions, and it's nuanced permissions. It's not just like, oh, you can access me. It's like right now, that's what we have. You can access or not.
Yeah, or you just give your data away.
Way too much of a blanket statement.
Yeah. I think that's I mean, I think people just assume that's the only way it can be too. And it's kind of amazing to realize how much we just sign away all of that stuff for whatever, the next 5 years or forever or whatever. And this is more like a disappearing message or something where you can share it for the amount of time it needs to be shared, and then it's not there anymore. And that's possible with this technology. That's clearly there. Yeah.
And then when you think about like even what that's going to do for business and for like big enterprise organizations, one of the issues that enterprise organizations have right now is a lot of them are saying to their employees, don't use these LLMs, don't use ChatGPT, don't use them. And the biggest reason why is because of the privacy concerns.
Yeah.
And an enterprise organization has all this proprietary data that's opening their data up to a third party that is not part of their organization.
Yeah.
Now with the spatial web, You can guardrail any aspect of the data because you can guardrail the domains, you can guardrail the data as domains. And so when you've got an enterprise organization, that enterprise that can be within the network and guardrailed off to where the capability is still there to build agents within that guardrailed part of the network. It can learn off of all of that data. It can access the network, but it can protect all of the data within that enterprise, right? That enterprise can decide who in their organization can access what data. That enterprise can decide what data is allowed to be accessible by the public, or what parts of the public, or memberships, or anything like that. Enterprise, most enterprises have several disparate data lakes, right? Where they've got data from this part of the company, data from this part of the company, and there's no way to join those data.
That's like those silos you were talking about before.
Now with this, the data is all going, they can build these intelligent agents that can share the data, learn, and they can gain insights that they never had before in their companies, but it all stays proprietary. And
so it's like
not
private
risk.
and transparent, weirdly.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's really interesting. I mean, I think when people really start to understand what's happening here and what's being built, and they start to really think about the implications of it, they're going to see that it's pretty powerful. And
what do you see? When you're thinking it's powerful, what do you envision? Like what would be your kind of one scenario that's makes you, I don't know, that's happy or good or for the future once people do realize this? Because it is a lot to think about, all these terms, and it's hard to get your head around. But like, how do you imagine that this could, in your own life or someone's life that you love, change? How would it change their life for the better?
Yeah. So it depends on how like near or far in the future you want to go. Although when I say far in the future, to me, that's just like 5 years because
okay,
so
let's
much
go there.
happened in 5 years. But
Let's go 5-10 years, best case
yeah,
scenario.
5-10 years. I mean, honestly, I feel like it's going to really shift the way we experience life as humans. And I think that it's going to enable us to shift in all kinds of ways. All of this technology, it's going to usher in this realm of abundance. I feel like it's a transaction protocol. It's blockchain agnostic. All blockchains can work within it. I feel like we're already seeing a shift away from fiat into digital currency. And I feel like within the spatial web, then we're really going to get to that value exchange position, right? To where our idea of what we've had for money, I think will completely shift. So I feel like everything that we understand about the way we interact with each other, the way we interact with technology, it's all going to I think it's just going to change into a way like I know a lot of people think when I talk like this that it sounds very utopian, but I definitely see that there can be so much good in this. I think that right now as a society, we've been so used to kind of scratching and clawing for existence. There's been this competitive nature because of that, right? We have a society that operates off of ego. And there's just so much. It's funny. So maybe this just popped into my head, but I forget who it was. I think it might be in like C.S. Lewis's, like some of his writings and stuff, but it was a distinction between aspiration and ambition. And it says,
ambition. Okay.
yeah, aspiration is high. Ambition is just higher than someone else. Like with ambition, you're just trying to be higher than the next person. But aspiration is high, right? So it's the ideal that you're going for your own personal best. And I think that we have the potential to kind of shift as a society to where we're kind of like looking more outward, we're more community focused, we're less in that vein of just trying to get better than the next guy or get the next thing to higher up to I don't know. And maybe
Yeah,
that I don't even know if it's
as you're
making
talking,
sense,
I'm
but
I'm thinking about how technology is such a big important part in so many people's lives personally, but also work, and how it does depend on this kind of judgment, um, likes, follows, how you look on Instagram or whatever. I mean, we've really gotten stuck in a way with what the algorithms have
that's that reward.
parameterized for us. What's that?
Yeah. It's that reward function.
The dopamine and all that, but just also that I wanted to talk about this idea of a sense of self. You talked about it with Mal, I think, but I'll just have to link to it. But there's this, there's also this, the way you were describing the agent or the AI or the technology. It's kind of going to develop a bit of a sense of self because it's biological, but because it's interacting with us, it's also opening up how we can see ourselves in the same way that the old technology, the stuff we're still using now, which is great, but also has really limited in a way the ways we think of self. So when you said you see it opening up our experience of the world, it made me think like maybe we're gonna look around ourselves again and notice the space we're in, and start thinking of self differently as more spatial instead of clicks and likes and images on screens and all of this.
Yeah, I would definitely agree with that. I think it's going to that point, I think it is. It's going to be able to enable us to interact with technology more in the world. Yeah, it will take us from being tethered to the devices.
Which is, yeah, do you experience that in your life? Are you also,
Oh
or
my
with
gosh,
your
if
family?
I leave if I don't have my phone, like say I accidentally leave the house, which that never happens anymore. If I
You
leave
never
the
leave it
house without
behind.
my phone, it's like, oh my gosh, you feel naked. You feel like a part of you is missing. And I know everybody feels that way. Your
Hmm.
battery dies on your phone. Oh my God.
Have you experienced any kind of like disconnection from space, the world? Because I keep coming back to this idea of natural, and I wonder if this is also gonna be an advocate, so to speak, for other beings and forms of life, in a way. Have you ever thought about that? Like, or in your own life, have you experienced some kind of way in which your focus has gone more toward technology and could open up ecologically through something like this technology?
Well, so to me, it's not all negative because in that vein, so I live in South Lake Tahoe right now. I've been up here since the beginning of
Oh,
COVID.
wonderful.
When I came up here, it was with my ex-boyfriend. We have not been together for the last 2 years, so I've been here by myself. But
Beautiful
all
place
my
to be, though.
friends are like in the Bay Area or Southern California
Oh,
or
wow.
the rest of the globe, right? So
Right.
and because I was up here for the first 2 years with him, it wasn't like I was out trying to make friends.
No.
So
Yeah.
I, it feels kind of isolating up here, but I've also been working really hard for the last 2 years. And so the
Yeah.
solitude, I've been embracing it and just keeping
Mm.
my head down and building and stuff. But a lot of my social needs are met through technology right now. That's how I'm keeping in touch with my friends. And we do the same silly stuff as everybody else, just send each other memes and all kinds of
Yeah,
stuff.
yeah.
But those are little touch points of connection. And I think they're important because you're not just sharing something, you're sharing things that will find like a common laugh or a common heartstring that you're pulling together, that kind of
Yeah.
stuff. It's beyond just sharing benign images, um and like Facebook and stuff like that, that helps me feel connected with
Hmm.
the people in my life, even though I'm not near them. So I think that's really cool. Now, the way this technology is evolving, yeah, it would be pretty cool to be able to like jump into a space and feel like I was in the room with my friends and
Yeah.
we could all just like gather like that. Or like I've thought for years, like, why is teleportation still not a thing? All those sci-fi
Wow.
books made it seem like we'd be having it by now.
Yeah. Yeah, maybe it's just a
But
different
maybe this
kind of
is the
television.
teleportation that we're gonna, so yeah.
That would be exciting. I think it's great you brought that up because, um, I mean, technology is wonderful and it's not either or, and we do connect very deeply through technology. It's
Yeah.
not that we, in a way that it's opened up ways for us to connect. And I don't know,
Yeah,
do you think that's kind of the point of it in a way?
I do. So it's interesting because I have friends that they feel very pressured by technology. They feel I think that I think a lot of it has to do with the fact that we're all individuals and we all have different psychological makeup. We all have different experiences and traumas and different things like that. We're
Yeah.
emotional beings. So I know some friends that they feel a lot of insecurity and a lot of pressure from social media to where it really deters them from wanting to have a whole lot to do with it, because otherwise then they kind of get sucked into this rabbit hole that makes them feel really bad about themselves.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I've always kind of approached social media differently than that, because to me, I've seen it more as the positive sides of it, of like, oh, great. Like when my kids were young, family members were always wanting me to email them pictures. And all
Oh,
that.
yeah,
It's like,
right.
great. Now you could just check my Facebook. It's a bulletin
That's,
board.
oh,
It'll
yeah.
let you feel like you're
You don't have to
involved.
email
You know,
400
it
people. You
makes it
just,
easier for me and we can all keep in touch,
that's
you
true. A
know.
wonderful thing.
So, like, to me, I've seen a lot of positives. I like, even with like Facebook, with the Facebook memories and stuff, like, that's cool to me. I love seeing stuff, even like things that you maybe wrote as like little like posts 10 years ago now, right? And it's like, oh, my past self is giving advice to my future self, because
Yeah.
that's
It's like
resonating with me. Aspects of it that maybe nobody even considered, but it's kind of unfolding that way. So I tend to like look at those parts of it and the positive sides. And then also too, like when I first got a smartphone, I turned notifications off on everything because it killed me. Like I was like, I can't be interrupted every second of my day. Like I just can't. So I think part of it is taking control of the technology and making it work for you, right? Because to me, that was too much of a distraction. It's like, okay, well, I'll check my email every 10, 15 minutes during a work day. I'll do these things, but I don't want it dinging me constantly, because then it'll drive me nuts.
Yeah. I did the same. And as you're talking, I'm thinking maybe because I know a lot of people who are really familiar with technology do these kinds of things and don't take it as seriously as, or don't get as sucked into the aspect of it that where you're comparing yourself and feeling bad. But those are real spaces for people. But do you think there's something about having thought about technology, worked with technology for so long, that's given you a way to have that kind of distance or space to be healthy about it and enjoy the emotional side of it without the judgmental side?
Um,
Or is it just you, like your personality? Or
I really don't know. Because it's really kind of hard to say, because I've actually had kind of, I'm definitely somebody who embraces change. And a lot of people have a fear of change, right? And I think that comes down to the free energy principle, that fear of that uncertainty. A lot of people, that creates this sense of fear because they're uncomfortable with it.
You like the
You know,
surprise, maybe a little bit.
yeah, to me in my life, that's where I've found possibility lies in the surprise. And that's kind of like
That
in
things could
physics,
always
you
go
want to
one way
keep
or
it
the
in that
other.
space. So but for the last, probably, I would say probably at least since like 2008-ish, watching what was happening with technology and seeing things that were unfolding and things that were starting to really wake up with these emerging technologies, I have just felt like lucky to be alive right now, to be able to witness this. And you can't stop any of it. So find your place in it. Then you actually have this opportunity to make a difference. And so I've been so preoccupied with that mental state that I think it lets me embrace all these things in this way.
That's very beautiful. Yeah.
I think people maybe who aren't that entrenched in that kind of a excitement over it all, then maybe they get preoccupied with other aspects of it, and it has a different effect on their mental state.
And there's something about understanding how it works. Even when we were talking about the deep learning and understanding that you're just being fed a bunch of stuff that was trained. Like once you kind of understand that, it does take, it does give you, at least for me, I guess I'm speaking for myself, it's easier to not take it so seriously and to understand it is just what it is, and maybe you can use your own agency to decide how you're going to use it. But
Yeah. And you can kind of laugh at it at that point.
yeah, you can enjoy.
There was a meme that I saw, and it was probably a couple of years ago now, but it was like, my favorite way of shopping is just to call out what I want and let, Facebook serve me an ad for it.
Right. That's great.
And it's like what you're talking about. It's the understanding of the underlying of how it's all working. So
It allows you have a playfulness with it, I think, that's very healthy.
yeah.
Well, so I guess to end, I want to hear about what you've been working on all these years. I want everyone to kind of know, but this is called Love and Philosophy. It's really beyond dichotomy too, but I wonder about that word love. Like we've been talking about all this technology and stuff, but do you feel like when you look at what you're doing, your work, and what you're sharing with people, it's a big word, I know, but does it feel like that, or like passion, or like something that
Yeah.
goes deep in you?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm definitely very passionate about what I've been doing. And it's because I do see a good outcome from all of this. I do see like the good that can come from all of this technology. And with what I see that Versus has been building and doing too, I feel like they're doing it the right way. They're doing it with kind of the benefit of humanity in mind.
It's
So
very mindful and or something.
yeah.
Yeah.
And to me, I see a lot of promise
Mm-hmm.
in this next era of computing, whereas we've been kind of in this state of like the technology has been taking advantage of all of us. I
Yeah.
feel like we're moving into this space where that's going to shift, and that's pretty exciting.
It
And
is.
that, to me, I just see that can only result in so much good.
Well, thank you
So
for your optimism and for it feels like it's a very authentic place that you're coming from. Um, and just kind of to end, like tell us what you're doing. I'm really interested in your Substack, for example. I found some
thank
very interesting articles there, which I wanted to talk about, but we're out of time. But what would you like people to
yeah.
know, or how can they find you?
Well, so education right now is my focus on this space. And so I've been doing a lot of writing, I've been doing a lot of podcasting. This year in January, I started a Substack, excuse me, because I wanted to be able to kind of have a space where we could build community around it. There's so many people I've been meeting who are interested in it. They're working on projects, or there's a lot of people who are either coming from the developer side or the the education side or the research side or even the investor side, right? And
Mm-hmm.
they're all curious, they all want to know. And so I wanted a space where people could find synergy and kind of connect with each other, and we could all learn together. So yeah, I started the Substack. And then I've also been hosting these Learning Lab live sessions. So monthly, I'm creating a new presentation every month that's an educational presentation to kind of introduce these concepts and walk people through it.
Mm-hmm.
And I do 2 different days with 2 different times so that people could I've got people coming from all over the globe. So,
That must be
and so far,
exciting. Wow.
yeah, it's been great. Yesterday was the first one for this month. So we did it last month. There were 2 sessions. This one was a brand new presentation. Um, it's like a 40-minute presentation and then about 45 minutes of just open discussion. And
Oh,
everybody's been participating. It's been
great.
so fun. The discussions become my favorite part.
So you present on some particular, almost like a class, or helping
Yeah,
people. That's wonderful.
and I'm going to be using the videos for a larger curriculum that I'm building around
Oh,
this.
good.
Yeah, and this month was on the Spatial Web protocol. That's what the presentation is for this month. And it's an overview. It's a very in-depth overview,
Mm-hmm.
but it's the beginning of what I'm creating for like this e-learning class around the actual protocol itself, because it's very detailed, and um, it's going to be made public soon. So
Okay.
when it is, then there'll be something that people can actually learn
Oh,
from.
good. So at some point,
That's where my focus is right
there's
now.
already a lot people can learn. You have a ton of content, just explaining what this is. And I encourage people to go, I would say read it and listen to the podcast. And will there be a way? So if I join, I was telling you I was trying to do the Substack, but it didn't work quite well. But once I joined, can I go back and look at are you recording the lectures that you gave and you'll have them in an archive or something, or?
Yeah, so they are
Okay.
being recorded. I'm still trying to figure out how that's going to work because
Yeah.
the classes are for the paid membership on the Substack. And
Mm-hmm.
so I have to be able to host them in a way that can be accessed by
For that.
the membership sector. So I'm figuring that out. But yes,
Probably it goes into the classes anyway at some point, so. But
yeah.
it's exciting because right now people are starting to find out about this. I mean, I think the book came out in 2018, 2019, Spatial Web, but that's actually not that long ago for these kind of things. It feels long when it's happening, but it's starting to really break now, and it's great that you're right there riding the wave and helping people understand it. So thanks for that, and I'll be sure to link to all this
Oh, thank you
in the
so
show
much,
notes.
Andrea. I appreciate it. And thank you for having me on your show. This has been a really, real nice. It's been a really nice conversation.
Yeah, it's been fun to talk to you. Is there anything that you want to say before we go? We didn't talk about yet that we should touch on real quick, or?
I mean, my one thing that I will say is I want people to get excited about this because the opportunity, it's not like this is something that's distant in the future. This is all unfolding this year. Right now, versus Genius platform, it's in beta with a closed beta, but they're opening it up to the wider developer community this summer. So yeah, it's upon us.
Now is the time.
Yeah.
Yeah, if you want to be at the forefront. Okay, well that's good to know. I'm glad to hear that, and I wish you lots of luck, and I'll
Thank
be
you. You as
following you.
well. Oh, thank you so much. Same
Okay,
here.
great.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
Bye.